From Kalamazoo, direct to you, it's a WKZO.com quickcast.
From an economic perspective, the difference in interest rates is in the neighborhood of 200 basis points. So issuing tax-free bonds is a very important aspect of this project. All of that said, we have the happy good fortune to report that earlier this year, the Obama administration implemented a special bonding program called Recovery Zone bonds, which allow private purpose activities to be financed by what amounts to be the equivalent of tax-free bonds. Every county in Michigan has been allocated an authorization for the issuance of these bonds. In our case, Kalamazoo County has an authorization of some $27 million. Unfortunately, the Events Center will require significantly more than $27 million to complete. We think maybe 40 to 45 million more would be the range. We have been advised by our attorneys, however, that there is a way that counties can share unused allocations of recovery zone bonds, and here is the genesis of our third recommendation in the report on page 8. I should digress from things financial at this point to mention that the committee did review construction cost figures in the Sweet Idea proposal. We assured ourselves that reasonable estimating procedures were followed in arriving at the $81 million cost of the project. We did nothing further in this area because there simply is not enough architectural understanding of the project to make more exacting estimates. Further, we all have the impression that the scope of the project will be very much more constrained by our estimates of excise tax collections and debt service needs than by any architectural definition of the facility at this point. Back to finance. One of the interesting points discovered by the committee was the IRS view that bond issuing entities must be liable for the operation of the facility the bonds finance. This served for several weeks as a major wall to recommending on behalf of the Sweet Idea proposal, because any operational deficit of the Event Center would become a financial liability to the county's general fund. The use of recovery zone bonds obviates this issue by allowing the county to contract with a management firm for the operation of the Event Center and assume the liability for any operating deficit. This was obviously a very positive development in our minds and made us even more mindful of our recommendation number 3 on page 8. Our attorneys made us aware of another issue in this area that we need to be mindful of, and that is that the federal authorization for recovery zone bonds expires under current legislation at the end of 2010. So there is a need for an element of haste in our decision making next year. We also discussed at length the use of the Event Center and concluded that the two major tenants would need to be highly contractually bound to occupy the facility. But we couldn't conclude what would constitute reasonable assurance of intent. Currently, we have assurances from both parties that they would sincerely consider occupancy if the project goes forward. But without detailed rental rates and understandings about concession, advertising, and other related revenues, no one is in a firm position at this point to make legally binding commitments. We suspect that much more conversation between the tenants, county administration, and vetting committee will need to be conducted over the next several months. Another conundrum for the committee in this area is the nature of long-term leases relative to the financing and operation of the Event Center. We would expect a normal tenant lease to be in the area of 10 years. Yet we are financing a facility for in the neighborhood of 30 years. This is one of those short-term versus long-term risks that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Much more needs to be done in this area if we are to minimize the county's financial risk. I should add in this area that we were very heartened by the presentation by officials of a company called Global Spectrum, a company that manages more than 100 similar facilities all over North America. These people gave us good assurance that an event center would be an attractive facility for concerts, etc., and would easily attract acts with a nationwide reputation and attendees from all over the southwestern Michigan region. We concluded our discussions in this area by agreeing that the events center should be managed by a professional management firm with a capability such as Global Spectrum.